As you can see, we are down a panelist. Cassandra could not make it, but we honor her with her photo on screen. I'll do intros very briefly, and then we'll get into it. I'll go in order. So Jarrod here runs TCG Crypto. It's a crypto fund that's tied to one of the most strategic Web 2 media investment firms, though I'm sure they'll probably shed that moniker once Jarrod does his job. He's a former Washington Post exec, 2 tours of duty over there, ran a crypto startup, and he's the first person I ever heard use the phrase Web 2.5. So I think that that's very applicable, and I don't know if I was just late to it or you were early to it, but we're all early.
I'll take it.
Wag me. And then we have, there you go. We have Ameer Carter, also known as Sursu, who's a mixed media artist, community builder. He's the founder of crypto consultancy, The Well, co-founder of the Mint Fund, co-founder of D-Sports gaming community, Black Hand. He's busy, as you can see in here. And frankly, after a canceled flight, he took a red eye to San Antonio and then drove the rest of the way to be here. So thank you, Ameer.
That's dedication.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It's called a commitment.
Respect.
And then we have Matt Medved, the co-founder and CEO of nftnow, which is, I think it's fair to say, the leading media company covering the ins and outs of the NFT space, whether you're a degen or a newbie. He's the former editor-in-chief of Spin and the founder of Billboard Dance and an accomplished DJ himself. So he's creator turned exec. So let's welcome the panel. There you go. And here let's put it this way. If you've been here all day, I'm just gonna sort of draw what the structure of the day was in our head. We started optimistic, world of possibilities, all the way up here at 50,000 feet. Then when we went into the breakouts, we kind of went to ground level to talk about the tactics and the issues that folks are dealing with at the beginning of their career, later stages of their career. Now we're back in the main room. We have this panel, we have one more, and then we're gonna party, and I'll tell you about that later. And so we're kind of zooming all the way back out, right? And so what we're trying to do in this conversation is put it all in context. Web 2, Web 3, creator economy, ownership economy. What do these words even mean? They were all invented 90 days ago. How do we really understand what are the forces at play here? What can we learn from history? And what can we take from that and use to sort of inform how we navigate the space now and how we think strategically about how we invest our time, money, efforts, relationships going forward? And so again, we have a very stacked panel to have this conversation. We have an artist and community builder. We have an exec turned entrepreneur turned exec turned investor, now on the other side of the table. And we have a musician turned journalist turned founder. So I think we have every angle covered here. And so really what I want to do just to kick it off is just say that the creative industries are really being transformed by Web3. But this is not the first time that the creative industries have gone through transformation. And so I guess my question is, what's different this time around? Maybe we'll go down the horn on this. So Jarrod?
Me first. I think what's most different this time around than I'd say from previous cycles and just what's been happening in the space is that we're really starting to become a lot more process oriented. I feel like as new technologies and things start to come into the space, it all exists around the edges, and you have to really reach out and approach it in order to take advantage. And what we're seeing this time around, and I could speak actually from experience, because when I started Poet back in 2018, we wanted to put digital IP on chain. People thought we were fucking crazy, and it was. Now it's of course, everyone puts digital IP on chain. But I remember speaking to the Comcast and the UMGs and all of these companies, and no one was really ready for it yet. And now this time around, a lot of those incumbent type larger brands are investing in funds. They're investing directly. They're thinking about how this becomes more applicable to what they're doing. Understanding the risks and the challenges that I think are starting to approach their business. And I think all of this just has to do with this notion of process, convenience, flow. So to use a direct example, I feel what we're seeing in the NFT space is probably the most interesting, because we're at the first mile of what's happening here, and NFTs have really been a product, and people are thinking about them as a monetization model or kind of an end phase minting. And I think what we're going to start seeing, and where a lot of this energy is starting to go, is that this becomes sort of a process. In everything you create online, whether that's writing or music or so forth. This is going to be like step one in that process, and I believe all the tools that we use today inside and outside of Web3.
Amir?
Word, I would agree with that. I would also say that what's different from before till now is I think there's a level of agency that is given to anyone that's creating within this environment because of the attribution of ownership, right? Like if you think of even when MySpace was out, and you had this like unique palette, especially if you learned CSS a little bit, like you could really create a really funky environment, but it wasn't something that you particularly owned. Now you could still like monetize it and figure out ways to make something about it, or that's what I did. But your like footprint on that isn't sort of like enmeshed in that, right? And I think now with the advent of this sort of technology is we now have the opportunity to completely, like when we say we're putting our flag down or we're putting our stamp on something, it's definitely not just realized, but we can pinpoint exactly that point of origin. And so I think that gives us this opportunity to say, well, if I know that what I'm doing gives me this, what is it called? Like this imprint forever, then what other things could I do that I could put my name on or that I could attach myself to? And that leads to unbridled collaboration, that leads to multiplayer interactions, and a lot of the other things that we're starting to see now.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think ownership is the critical difference. In my eyes, that's the difference between fandom, like being a fan, and being a shareholder. Being a member of an audience or like an engaged member of a community. It's having a stake in it. And what's incredible to see is I think that, with NFTs and Web3, we're making good on the original promise of the internet, which was that, no matter how niche your creative practice may be, you could find enough people globally to come together to support you in that. It gets back to the idea of Kevin Kelly's 1,000 True Fans, which is the idea that as a creator, you don't actually need millions of fans at scale to be successful. You just need 1,000 true fans who are going to basically pick up anything you put down, buy the ticket, take the ride, buy the merch, etc. And you can find them from all over the world. The issue was in Web 2, the centralized social media platforms put ads and algorithms in the way and made it so you had to pay to even reach a fraction of your organic following. And now with Web3, it really, I think, makes good on that as it brings back this level of ownership. You're no longer a renter on the internet. And if you think about it, I always give the example, if like, whatever you are, it doesn't matter if you're an up-and-coming rapper in the Bay Area, if you're a death metal band in Oklahoma, like if you can find 1,000 fans across the world who vibe with what you're doing, and obviously it goes far beyond music, you can have a sustainable career. If you drop an NFT for $100, that's $100,000 in revenue, which is a lot more than most of my musician friends have ever seen from the streaming services. So I think that the ownership element is absolutely critical in the way that it activates community.
So let's jump off of that. Thank you for bringing up music, because I want to use music as a sort of case study. And fortunately, we all have deep ties to music, so that makes it easy. Music tends to be the first industry to get disrupted over and over and over again. When you think about formats, 70s, 80s, you think about, piracy and P2P networks in the 2000s, you think about streaming, you think about basically everything. First to go and first to sort of get decimated. And the music industry, for any sense of history, was crushing it, and then it got completely decimated. And now they're making more money than ever, not just because of their stake in Spotify. So it's interesting to think about. But I guess my question is, and sorry, let's also just note the fact that like in Web3 world, it's funny because music, yeah, it's a lightweight asset and it's easy to change, but it's the most complicated from a rights standpoint. So when you think about like profit participation, like films look like a walk in the park. But what is it about music that, that has changed, and what can we learn from what's been happening in music, even if you look into like music DAOs, music NFTs, as a sort of leading indicator of where the future's headed? Anyone can jump in. Matt, you do it.
Okay. Well, look, music permeates culture across the board. Like, music soundtracks TV film, music dictates fashion, music drives culture in so many different categories. So it's no surprise to me that music is often like, ground zero when it comes to this. What's really interesting is I think in this example with Web3, the most significant disruptions for music have yet to come. I think that the majority of music fans are not yet in Web3, and they are not yet in NFTs. And that's incredibly powerful because if you think about it, like we've already seen really interesting use cases, developments and advances of music NFTs, the creation of what appears to be a secondary market for it, which is a really interesting step. But to me, music in Web3 is predicated on fandom. Fandom is like the most powerful force. Fandom is what is really going to create and drive value there. And we still barely scratch the surface of like the entirety of like music fans on Earth. And so I think that as technology continues to develop, as we start to see more and more artists come into the space and understand that a music NFT, like the sale of a music NFT is not an end, it's a beginning. It's a beginning of a new connection between you and your fans. You can reach them directly. Like you have the data, you can reach them. Like Spotify does not give you that, as a musician. You can reward them, you can airdrop them. Like that connection and that bond and the ability to really like reward your super fans is what I think is going to really like push music into Web3 into prime time.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to expand on that because I think Matt nails it. Like, the like best benefit of NFTs is about like brokering relationships and tighter connections. And if you speak to like any artist that's in this space, like a great example is Mark Brownstein from the Disco Biscuits, who's like really like jumped into. I'm showing my jam band colors, but like really kind of like jumped into this space. And he's like, look, like we started like marketing ourselves and we'd have a website, people would find us through Google. Then Facebook had this promise of building Facebook pages, but it felt somewhat like artificial, like you weren't really connecting with the band, you're connecting with the social media manager and Twitter and so forth. And now with like these NFT music type projects, like he's in there, he's in the Discord, he's like building tighter relationships with his fans. They're like investing together, they're creating together. So for a fan, like this level of access is completely unprecedented to anything prior. And that's where, my personal interest and like how we think about it on the investment side is like really doubling down there. It's like just by way of crypto in general, it's financialization of X. So you're asking fans to pay. And when you're asking fans to pay, you need to think about like, what is that going to be? What is that going to be in exchange of? So there's like a bunch of platforms. There's companies like Medallion and others that are like really thinking about, okay, like targeting these super fans, how can you think about giving like a lot of additional benefits to people who purchase these NFTs, and what could they be? That could be early ticketing, that could be backstage passes. To use the Mark Brownstein Disco Biscuits example, if you have an NFT, you could unlock soundcheck, and you could like literally tune into their soundcheck and get access to that value. So I feel like why music is really hitting hard too is there is so much passion. I think crypto in general is a passion business, but I think like the best businesses are really built around passion, things that make people feel good. And music is, a high indicator in a bunch of different arenas to really unlock that.
Ameer?
I mean, they've pretty much said what I would have said. I mean, I think if anything, the only addition that I would add is that it reminds me of, I forget the name of it, but I remember Ryan Leslie built a thing called Superlayer or something to that effect, and that was sort of the
Superphone.
Superphone, thank you, yes, it's exactly what it was. And it was essentially kind of a platform where you could, as an artist, you would have everyone kind of like text this number, and then you would sort of in a way subscribe to the artist. And Ryan Leslie was always a person who I think really embodied kind of like the Nipsey Hussle type of opportunity where it was saying, hey, like for the first 100 fans that buy this ticket for $500, I'll host a party in England. And he like rented out an entire castle and brought all those people in to have that event, right? Like, and so I think like the formative thing is that when you can capture fandom in a very eclectic way, in a very dynamic way, through the use of NFTs as a conduit to build a relationship, then crazy, amazing things can happen. It really just is a matter of both kind of like the expectation of the artist and what they are wanting to sort of provide, right? And I think when we think about art and we think about music, it's not just the art itself that we're indulging in, we're also indulging in that person's lifestyle, right? And so how do you find a way to bring that together where these people feel like they're living through you, right? Vicariously through you. And I think NFTs are a very interesting opportunity to really like amplify that 1,000%.
Totally. So one thing, I'll just make a comment, and then I want to go to something that Jarrod said. The comment is, first of all, just shout out Ryan Leslie being ahead of the curve. But to that point, this idea that the phrase that kind of keeps bopping around in my head is the fact that the best Web3 executions, whether you're new to the space or you've been around for a while, are kind of always preceded by what I think of as like Web3 values, right? And it's getting the values right. And I think that it's funny because you can kind of apply that lens to what's been happening over the last 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, you look at like Disco Biscuits and the community that they've built, you look at other bands, you look at other, call it creative communities, or efforts like Superphone, and you can say, listen, this is the same set of values being expressed through a certain sets of technologies. And Web3 has really kind of just like opened up that toolbox and introduced a whole lot of new things that you can deploy. The thing I want to go back to that you said, Jarrod, was the financialization of X. And that's a good thing. I mean, it's a thing. It's a good thing, it's a bad thing, and it's kind of like the bad view of it is like, do I want the financialization of everything? What does that actually do when, first of all, the folks that are best at like incentive design and like marketing and tech and like smart contracts end up wiping the floor with all of the best creative talent, let's just say, that just doesn't have access to the right relationships. They didn't like learn to code. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. And like, how do we make sure that we avoid a culture that sort of gets filled with cotton candy bullshit, if I put it politely, when the folks that are capable of doing that really great, incredible, transformative work just need access to those tools, resources, relationships? How do you navigate that?
I think like what we're seeing, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure everyone in this room saw that ridiculous Anthony Hopkins tweet yesterday where like he was like mesmerized buying NFTs. There's so many efforts. I think like you asked in the beginning, like what's changed in this cycle and like what's changing like in this arena that's different than last time. Like the amount of energy that has really like filled out all of the different gaps that it takes to like do recruiting, bring people in, build platforms, education, on-ramping, has really just exploded, right? Like I talk about this all the time, like what does crypto scale look like? Like we talk about crypto scale, but like does crypto scale mean, you know, it goes to a lot of industries, does it mean more people are coming in? Like do we look at it in the traditional way of like users and so forth? But I think what we could all agree on, and music is an example, and you know, you see like what nftnow and like technology is being built to create content and things like that. There's just more and more things coming out and more people and agencies that are like working with celebrities and high caliber talent to kind of be bringing things in. Like I don't think there's 1 week that someone from Churnin Entertainment, like one of the actors or talent doesn't come to us and they're like, what should our NFT, you know, project be? So I feel like while there is a barrier to entry, to your point, because there are things that are highly technical and you know there could be heavy concentration, especially when it's related to the financialization of. One observation I think in Web3 in particular that I love is that these companies really want to like partner with IP. There's validation in those sort of like relationships, like work with Disney, you know, work with the NBA, work with sports. You see it constantly, like the celebrations of these companies like working with this high profile IP. So I actually think that's like a core focus for a lot of these companies, and I think it's particularly unique because I think a lot of Web3 founders want that relationship, want that validation, and they're really trying to get those key creators in.
Got it. Ameer, Matt?
Yeah, I think on the flip side of that too, the proliferation of public goods, I think is a very important thing that's been happening within Web3. And then even the idea of groups building protocols that enable other people to build on top of them, and a phrase that's been moved around called hyperstructures.
I see a Zora logo on your shirt.
Yeah, I was gonna point to Zora as one of those very key moving pieces in the proliferation of public goods outside of like Gitcoin, endowment, doing good, stuff like that. But the idea of like, let's say And the phrase was coined by Jacob, one of the co-founders of Zora. It's called like hyperstructures, and that's essentially like this idea that you're building a completely permissionless, autonomous like a vehicle, and that it enables agency for anyone to build on top of it, and it's completely free, right? And so when you have public goods, things that are free to use, like for example, when we don't really think about this, but like our public parks, our recreational centers, like our pools, things of that nature, like all of these are all funded by us via taxes, things of that nature, but they're public goods for us to enjoy whether we use them or not, right? But the idea that they have that they're accessible allows other communities to form around them and build unique opportunities for themselves. And I think like for Web3 to move in a space that we are getting away from the cotton candiness, right, is building a culture around folks that rally and support those causes and support those those environments, right, and fund them and become builders to kind of move those things forward, right? And so you see a lot of active contributions to folks with all types of Gitcoin grants. You see active grants being done by many of the larger DAOs like Uniswap and Aave, for instance. Like they're giving away tons of money for people to come through and really think about unique and inventive ways to leverage their platform to enable more people to use it.
Amazing.
Right? And so those types of things I think are moving sort of in tandem with what Jarrod was talking about as another way of ensuring that this space is I guess, culturally in a more positive than negative.
Time's flying, so Matt, any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's interesting, like, when I talk about, like, financialization of this, financialization of that, I mean, like, we live in a capitalist society. Like, industries have already been financialized. Like, the art market has already been financialized, you know? Like, the music industry is financialized. What I think Web3 is, the reason why I think Web3 is a force for good is that it removes the, it removes the gatekeepers that have traditionally owned the point of exchange and points of value in these areas, and makes it a lot more open and egalitarian and for people to be able to succeed. Like if you take the art example, you know, you go from major auction houses and leading galleries deciding who gets to rise and who falls, to basically scrambling to keep up to capitalize on artists who are now already taking off on their own.
This is a very Hobbesian view, but it's kind of like, if everything has already been financialized, then to believe otherwise is to sort of like fall prey to the illusion that those institutions wanted you to believe, right? While they were busy getting rich. Exactly.
Like, it's been financialized, and it's been the creators who have largely been getting the shaft. So this changes that, and so I'm a pragmatist on this.
Fair point. Okay. All right, so we have 14 minutes left. I want to get to some sort of meaty issues. So what Web 2, Web 1, call it non-Web 3 institutions, do you think are actually best positioned to succeed in this new era and will sort of like reconfigure and adapt? But more interestingly, which Web non-3 institutions do you think are most likely to fall and why? Name names. You're an investor now, so.
I mean, it's.
You can describe the shape of the institutions that will fall, and then I'll push you to name names.
So I'm gonna skirt around the answer, but mainly to just like prove one point is, I believe that, like, I don't like the Web 2, Web 3 binary type comment. Like on Twitter, it's just ridiculous at this point, but it's like, I don't think it's necessarily binary. I think a lot of Web3 is highly additive and should be thought of in that sort of way. So when I think about like incumbent type companies in the Web 1, Web 2 era, and who's most at risk, or you know, who will be most rewarded, the lens I try to put on it is like, Web3 is an arena for the active consumer, right? And when you kind of put on that sort of lens, which is understanding, okay, people are like in Web3 are spending a ton of time in Discord, they want to buy things online, they're willing to spend money, they go through the effort. Like, I like compare crypto to going to the gym. People are like, crypto is like so not user friendly, and it's like, no, like you kind of have to go through that sort of process in order to strengthen your skills, and once you do that, you're addicted and you're better for it. So when you put like the active consumer lens on things, then I think you could start to like have that conversation. Like, I don't necessarily think a Netflix or a Spotify, for instance, are are going to be that disrupted yet, like from consumer platform points of view, because they're laid back approach, they're highly programmed, you know, they from a consumer experience, like all the music in your pocket, like I know like there's like, you know, the argument of what they do with artists, but from a user perspective, like you are kind of getting that access, same with Netflix when those things are programmable. But on the active side, I think like that's where things start to become a lot more interesting. And I don't know, like common themes, like common answers are like gaming and, you know, other things there, but I don't know if I can necessarily pick one out. So I totally just avoided.
I mean, honestly, that's what I
avoided
expected
the answer,
you to do.
but just shared my thinking.
Yeah, go for it.
I kind of think of it similarly. Like, I think the best Web 2-ish institutions are going to be those that understand, I think, two fundamental things. The first is that it's okay that they don't speak the full Web3 language because they're just not, right? Like that would require an entire rework of everything that they're doing, I think, personally, right? And so for them, it's really about saying, here are things that we see that folks value, and we want to find ways to not just mimic, but build a framework to facilitate that, which I think in certain ways will be agnostic to what they already have, and then in other ways will be sort of like it'll consume the other, and then in other ways it'll be completely separate. But I think it's just a matter of like them figuring out based upon their particular need, their particular customer, and why they're bringing in other customers. I think that would be the most important thing. If your why is not there, if it's sort of just like, because we need an extra revenue source, then you'll fail. And that's why, like, I think, for example, gaming organizations, like esports organizations specifically, like have a very difficult time, right? Like, and I don't want to make this long, but for example, Black Hand's a decentralized esports group, but you can look at, let's say, like FaZe Clan, Fnatic, T1, so on and so forth. Many of them, when they try to implement any sort of like Web3 additions, like NFTs or memberships, their entire community is in uproar. And it's not as if like it's a majority, it's still a larger vocal minority, like in the grand scheme of all gamers that exist, because most don't care. But for the most part, they have been completely limited because of the type of brand cachet that they've built, right? And I think for us, because we haven't pretended to be anything like what they are, and we're presenting something completely different, I think fully embodying Web3, those same fans, when they look at what Fnatic is doing and they look at what we're doing, they're saying, well, actually, it's not too bad. We kind of like this.
So it's like context and the brand sort of perception that you put out about what values you have can either open up lanes or they can box you in.
100%.
Right.
And I think a lot of organizations, whether it's in gaming or other industries, are in many ways very boxed in. And they have to find ways to kind of like open that box and do it very carefully, because if not, their fans are going to close it back for them.
Right.
Yeah,
Matt?
great points. I touched on it earlier with like the difference between audience and community. Audience is aware that you exist. Community actually wants to see you win and has a stake in seeing that. I think that a lot of companies that were built on an audience model, with where people are the product and it's based on weak ties at the top of the funnel, are going to find trouble, because I think that, you know, legacy media comes to mind. That's where I come from, and that's one of the reasons why we decided to do something different with nftnow. We don't touch programmatic ads because we believe that they lead to misaligned incentives, where you're not actually serving your community members, you're serving the interest of advertisers or brands, or like, you know, trying to game Google algorithms to be able to like get clicks up. That's not what it's about. And that's not necessarily what your readers or what your community members actually want you to do. And that's just one area, but I do think that you know, the legacy media industry is in trouble, and that's one of the reasons why we're building infrastructure at nftnow to help right that ship.
Amazing. Okay. I mean, honestly, we have a little more than 7 minutes left, and I feel like this conversation could go for a long, long time. But I want to go back to something, Jarrod, that you said, and then we'll find a way to land the ship. If I hear what you're saying correctly, it really feels like one of the big differences is from a user context, whether this is a lean back, phone in your pocket, passive experience, Netflix and chill, Spotify phone in your pocket, go get on with your life, versus a lean in context, right? And it feels like crypto these days, and especially call it Web3 and the creator economy, the executions are really lean forward. Get into Discord, respond to this, airdrop this, bounty that, like go, 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 go. So like it's nuts. And frankly, like I've had to do a bit of a Discord detox myself for that very reason. It sounds like I'm not the only one. And I guess I'm interested to think, and obviously you're quite early to this with Poet, but like as this wave, because I don't think, you tell me if you feel differently, I don't think that crypto will always be relegated to this lean in environment. I think it's just like, this is the opening move. And then I'm curious about what happens when crypto moves into those more, call it lean back, always on experiences, whether that's from a consumer standpoint or just part of the infrastructure. So I don't know, I just kind of wanted to play with that idea a little bit, and I'm curious about what you all think.
I mean, I think it is a feature. Like, I think even as Web3 like evolves into broader markets and broader experiences, like we may build better convenience for people to be active participants, but there's still going to be active participants, right? Like that's like, I think it's always wise to like really identify what's particularly unique and what's happening in the Web3 space. And it is like, to what Matt was saying, like people feel a tighter connection. They feel like they're a part of the decisioning. It's a relationship type business. So all of that is all very much like lean in around passions and getting things done. But I don't think necessarily like that value should ever be pulled away. I think like that is what's uniquely enabled by crypto and a lot of like the crypto dynamics that are built here. But I think things will get easier. Like I like tweeted this the other day, like I can't stand Discord. And I feel like there's such amazing things happening in the DAO structures that both like within DAOs themselves, but also for incumbent companies to think about how they work could be done. But the way that it evolves in Discord is just so difficult. And I'm like, hopefully there's a day when, I'm in Flamingo DAO or I'm in Seed Club and, there's a vote and I get a text that's basically like, Jarrod, vote yes or no on this proposal.
1, 2,
exactly.
done.
Like, right? Or like it'll come to like my MetaMask and it'll just be like a proposed transaction. But like, that's where I think things start to become like more convenient. But I think the active participation is what's so special about this.
So unless something to say on that, I want to make sure that we have enough time as we close this out to kind of get into like how you have put everything in context, and whether that's in conversations, whether that's like books, podcasts, articles. Obviously, I think it's an opportunity for each of you to plug your own work, which I want to make sure that you have ample time to do. But I mean, I guess, like I love reading like history of media and film and stuff like that, because whatever, I like that stuff. But how are you putting what is happening now in the broader context? Because I feel like it's so easy to be in gear one of a car and just be like, what's happening, this, that, and by the way, nftnow is like the chronicler of all of those movements. But like, and you also do a good job, the definitive guide to this, getting started with that. But how do you put this in not just the broader context of Web3, but the broader context of the creative industries as a whole?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we founded nftnow to solve a problem that we saw in the space when we started to go down the rabbit hole, which was the lack of dedicated, independent, incredible coverage of the NFT space. I started dabbling in crypto back in 2013, and I did the crypto learning curve then. I still had to do the NFT learning curve in 2020. And a lot of people are doing both at the same time, and that's incredibly daunting. And so that's why with nftnow, the mission has always been empower the creators of culture, help drive mainstream adoption of NFTs. And the latter part is critical because it's not about just like preaching to the choir of people who are already here and already understand this. It's about converting the masses and bringing new people in. And that starts with education, it starts with resources, onboarding, helping people demystify this technology, helping people understand why it matters, how it actually empowers creators, how it's far more than just a simple like speculative market, and also helping people get past the like flawed and the flawed UX that currently exists right now. Because we need to get a lot better, and there's so much friction right now to go from interest to onboard, and that's why nftnow is always, a big focus of ours has always been those guides, those how-tos, those resources, and we cater to people who are who are down the rabbit hole, and also people who are just getting their feet wet, and yeah, that's why we have different offerings across different platforms. The podcast is a great way to sort of like, with the NFT Now podcast, bring in creators, we bring in builders in the space, and be able to kind of contextualize like their significance within a larger landscape.
Very quickly, that was great. Give us one plug that's not NFT Now. What's your favorite other resource?
That's a great question. You know, I mean, one thing that I like is that when we started NFT Now, a lot of people were like, are you just going to focus on NFTs, like only NFTs? What about crypto? What about DeFi? And I was like, only NFTs? NFTs are going to be an ocean. Like, we're not even going to be able to keep up with every single area of NFTs. Like, blockchain gaming is going to be its whole other area. There's going to be an IGN of Web3 that's going to do that in a much more granular way. And so I really like publications like The Defiant, that are really focused on other areas and dedicated like verticals. Obviously love CoinDesk, glad to be here, you know. They do a great job as well.
Teed that one up, there we go.
But I love like kind of like doubling down on like a subject matter area and really catering to it like and going deep.
Amazing. Yeah. So Ameer, when you zoom out, what are the sort of sources of knowledge for you that help you make sense of the chaos?
I think because of my experience as a designer, I'm often trying a lot of things. The one thing that I've also noticed about crypto is that like, to be crypto curious means you have to have some sort of like fungible income in order to do that, right? Because a lot of things require you to pay to try services and, you know, and to test. And I've been fortunate enough to kind of figure that out. But for me, it's really just being in the mix, right? Like when I started the NFT journey in like fall of 2020, the first thing I did immediately after learning how to mint was like, how could I teach this to someone else? And I built a guide on Instagram. I did a whole like course on Clubhouse called Becoming a Crypto Creator. Like I did a bunch of like weird stuff, but a lot of those things kind of helped me catalyze a lot of conversations and thoughts about like what I need to do for, within the space, and then like how I could kind of transfer that to other people. And so for me, it was really just about like anything that I picked up and that I learned, I wanted to find a way to distill it to someone else. And that just became the way for me to say like, how can I capture more things that are happening within the space so that I can give those back to other people. And I also want to credit like my parents, my brother, like those are folks that I'd always talk to about what was going on, even though they didn't necessarily understand it in the same speed. But a lot of their questions helped me find ways to frame and discover more ways that I could like, I would say sort of like condense what's happening and again, like distill it. So I would say stuff like that, obviously like looking at NFT Now, being a part of Crypto Culture Society, like the CCS group. And I was fortunate enough to do 2 workshops there. I read a lot of essays from like Toby Shorin and the folks at Other Internet. I think their one essay, Building Positive Some Outcomes, Positive Some Worlds, is probably one of the biggest influences on me in the NFT space. So definitely just like reading a lot of independent thinkers and finding ways to collaborate with them has helped me learn so much.
Amazing. We are well over time, so Jarrod, please bring us home.
I'm going to say very similar things, but I'll just say like, I think, I feel like the crypto business is a media business, like in all of its different arenas. I think Dave Phelps, who's amazing to follow on Twitter, if anyone hasn't followed him, should jump on. Calfund said that like because data is public, because on blockchain data is public, effectively every company is a media business, and I think like that's a lens to kind of think about, especially like education and on-ramping, like creating kind of content, distilling these complex things down and putting it out there. Like we started like a media DAO called Dark Star, a few of us, like Brian Flynn and a few others, where we kind of like write on very like rich cultural type topics in Web3. And the way that we write it is effectively saying like, how can we like make this attractive to someone in Web2 and kind of distill it down, but in the same article also make it attractive to someone in Web3. And it's amazing like when you start to take that approach, how you really think about context and delivery and things of that nature. But yeah, I mean, I'd say more and more like why I love this space and having a background in media is I feel like it's that sort of expertise and understanding that is kind of very critical to, you know, the onboarding and, you know, evolution of crypto. So.
Please give our panelists a hand. Thank you so much.
job. Crushed it.
There you go. There you go.